I'm going to go through some of these jury questions.
These are
On Sunday, September 25th, 2016, Tex McIver spent the day golfing with his wife, Diane. Afterwards, they went back to their ranch home in Putnam County, where Diane's friend Danny Joe Carter was spending the weekend with them. At the end of the day, all three headed back to Atlanta in the McIver's SUV. Danny Joe was driving because Diane and Tex had been drinking wine. Diane was in the front passenger seat and Tex was in the back seat. When they got to downtown Atlanta on the connector, they hit traffic, so they took the Edgewood exit. As they got off the road, Tex was concerned about the neighborhood they were in, so he asked Diane to hand him his gun from the console. They continued driving up Piedmont Road, and somewhere between 12th and 14th Street, the gun went off. The bullet traveled through the front passenger seat and struck Diane. She died the next day at the hospital. Tex McIver says it was an accident, but prosecutors say it's murder. This is the trial of Tex McIver.
There's really one thing that you need to know about Tex McIver and Diane McIver to know that he did not intentionally shoot his wife, and that is that he loved her.
On Diane's death, he went from negative $5,000 to over $1.1 million cash instantly. And he was the executor and one of the beneficiaries of Diane's $7 million estate. It was aimed right at her back.
He's falling asleep. When I get back in my car, the gun just discharges and goes off.
And she's driving as fast as she could. And she says the defendant tells her, slow down. You can get this case dismissed. And if you do, there's a large bonus in it for you. And I won't mind if you share it with the DA.
You said she made loans to the defendant.
Yes.
And did she expect Mr. McIver to pay her on time with interest?
His loan was interest only, so he only paid interest. He didn't pay any principal.
Now, you said his loan. Tell the jury a little bit about his loan and what the loan was for.
The loan was for $350,000. I'm not sure what the loan was, what the money was given to him for. It started January 15th of 2012, and he made interest-only payments. It was a 3-year term originally, and the payments were $1,531 a month. And end of the 3 years, Diane came to me, it was January, I guess, of 15, to say, I've re-upped the loan for another 3 years, and I've reduced his payment to $1,400 and something dollars. It wouldn't be in the checkbook registers. It was a whole, I had a file for each person that had a loan out, and each month it had the amount of the payment, and then I posted the payments as they were being made. So there is a spreadsheet for that someplace.
The loan was for $350K?
Yes.
And it was how many years?
The original was 3.
And that started when?
January 15th. The payment was due on the 18th of the month, and it started in January. I think it was 2012.
It was 3 years away.
And it was $1,500 and some change a month. My partner is interior designer, and the condo, the second condo, when they put them together, the kitchen was torn out. It was just a big party with a bedroom. And Tex had asked us what we thought it would cost to put that condo back as a condo, if he wanted to put it on the market.
When you say put that back, it's put them back up into the condo.
Right, and you'd have to put the kitchen back in, and put it back together.
Sell the second.
Yes.
And this was less than 24 hours after Ms. McIver.
It was either, I went Monday night, Tuesday night, and Wednesday night. It was one of those 3 nights.
Funny question.
Need a break, Mr. Brown?
I'll be all right, just give me a minute. It's what my job was, and that's how I saw it. It was very important to me to finish. Sorry.
Just take a minute to take a deep breath.
I didn't think it would be this hard. It's been too long. Okay. So that's why. It was important to me to finish her life.
Because her money was so important for her.
It was important to
I'm
her.
sorry, objection.
Stop doing that. Don't argue through your questions. Save that for, if you want to give closing, negotiate with Mr. Rucker and his company.
After showing him your documents, your spreadsheets, did you say anything about her finances?
He thought she had more money than what she had. He was surprised at the number that was in her checking accounts.
Tex started saying, girls, I wish you hadn't gotten off here. This is a bad idea. This is a bad area. You should have just stayed on 85. We continued driving down here, and this light was red. Tex asked Diane, he said, darling, would you hand me my gun?
Who actually opened the console so that the gun could come out?
Diane did. As she was looking, Tex said, it's in the bag. And so she just reached over and got it. And I'm sitting here with both of my hands on and shut the console and handed it to him.
And when you were at the red light, can you tell the jurors what happened?
Well, we were sitting at the light and I hear click, click, click. And I looked at Diane and asked her what she was doing. She said, I'm just making sure the door's locked. And I heard a big boom, and I didn't know what it was. I thought there was an explosion somewhere. And I saw a puff of smoke, and I could see his hand. And I could see the top of the gun, I could see part of the gun, his hands, and some of the bag.
And what happened next?
She said, Tex, you shot me.
Did he say anything?
No. I thought it was a joke, and then I realized it wasn't. And then I knew that I had to get to the nearest emergency room. I asked Tex where the closest emergency room was. He said, Emery, I wanted to panic, but I knew that I couldn't. She was breathing really hard and, kind of like panicky. He leaned forward and was holding her head with both hands and was saying, Diane, Diane. At one point he said, she's still breathing. I pulled in, there were some vehicles that were there in front of us, and Tex got out of the car. He had yelled for a gurney and didn't look at me, but looked past me and said, Danny Joe, I hate to see you get wrapped up in this. I've seen how these things can go down. You just need to say you came down here as a friend of the family.
When I entered the room after I had spoken to her husband, she was starting to ask questions. She asked me if she was going to die.
And was that all the questions that she asked you?
Yeah, she just asked me. She looked at me and said, am I going to die?
What did you hear Ms. McIver say?
I just heard it was an accident.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Vinny Politan, and welcome to Late Feed Law. Hope you enjoyed our new band. We got the new drummer here tonight. Sorry about that. It was up a little bit loud for you, but great to have you aboard. Day 7 of the Tex McIver case, and a lot of things happened today. Some big moments, including big moments from the jurors. Danny Jo Carter, the star witness of this case, the most important witness, completed her 3rd day of testimony today. More questions. Her husband took the stand as well. Trust Dale Cardwell took the stand as well. We're going to talk about all that with my legal dream team tonight. Meg Strickler, great criminal defense attorney, but sees things very differently, I think, in this particular case.
Correct.
And we've got defense investigator to the stars right here, Charles Middlestat. Do you want to reel off some of the names of your former clients, or you don't want to keep that quiet for now?
Yeah, let's keep that.
We'll keep that quiet. Trust me, though. Big time people get in trouble here. They hire an attorney like Meg. They hire an investigator like Charles. All right, let's start here, okay? Danny Jo Carter. I think it was 21 or 22 questions from the jurors. I want to go through the top 10 that they asked her. And it starts for, have you ever been in a vehicle before with Tex when he's asked for a gun? Her answer was no.
I think all of these questions kind of show the mindset. They are asking very pointed, very direct questions that are asking, how did this happen? And if it was indeed an accident, how do you explain some of these questions that were asked? And it sounds to me like that was not, these questions that got asked were not answered in a way that she didn't know, but didn't help the case for Tex.
Didn't help the case. I mean,
No.
I like when the jury gets to ask questions, which they are in this case, Charles. It's a unique opportunity because it doesn't happen in every case, every jurisdiction. This judge is allowing it. You can read a little bit into the minds of what these jurors are wondering. Have you ever been in a vehicle before with Tex when he's asked for a gun? The answer is no. Why would a juror want to know that? And how worried are you from the defense side from that question?
You know, I think they're looking for additional insight. There's just certain things that have not come out in the testimony. There are certain dots that have not been connected for them. And so, in this case, I think they're trying to see if there's some sort of pattern of conduct.
Or if this was out of the normal
It's completely
conduct?
out of the, yeah, out of
So
the
this is
norm.
out of the norm, him asking for a gun. So is that?
Correct.
Yeah. So
It does not corroborate his story then, because
But-
he was always nervous about driving in scary places. He'd
No,
have that
I
gun
disagree
handy
with
and
that.
quick.
I disagree with that. This was an isolated incident. They felt their safety, for whatever reason, right or wrong, they felt their safety was in jeopardy.
their or his? He felt his, and no one else was asking for the gun, were they?
Irony, huh? Two
Well,
women.
whoever made that determination, I mean, certainly we heard that Diane was locking her door. We heard this click, click, click
Right.
thing, right? So at some point, she clearly felt her safety could potentially be in jeopardy. So there's another indication, but I actually think it plays better the fact that there is no pattern there. So I don't, to me, it's kind of a wash. It doesn't, I wouldn't read one way too strongly on either direction.
Well, there's some other questions here that I'd be a little more worried about.
That's maybe a different matter.
By the way, folks, put your questions and your comments, please. Put them up here. I've got a computer. I've got phones. I can read and see everything you're doing. Let me get back on it here. So I'll be able to see your comments. And let's see who's watching tonight, by the way. We've got Melissa and Stephanie and Lauren and Angela and Cindy and Michelle and Melissa and Pam and Kathy all here tonight. And Tim with all these women tonight, right? Also, Mark is here. Who else we got? We got Bonnie and Warren, Latrice. I'm reading your comments and your questions, so keep posting them and we will get to them. One of the other questions jurors had for Danny Joe Carter. Do you know if the SUV had hands-free Bluetooth calling function? Do you know if the SUV had built-in navigation system? Again, they are now wondering the question that we've all been talking about that wasn't supposed to be argued, but it's now part of this case, that he went to Emory.
Absolutely, they're thinking about it.
Well, there's
don't
two.
you
I
think?
mean,
Yeah.
one of them, I think, the hands-free has to do with calling 911 or the failure
Right.
to call 911.
Failure.
Yeah. Now, honestly.
Anyway, here's the truck, by the way. My guess is that the Ford Expedition, late model like that, pretty much probably has that hands-free.
Listen, they had.
They got an
Every
emergency
car.
button. They got
They
everything.
got the
They
911
had
button.
cell phones, so there was a decision that was made not to call.
Well, she didn't have hers. Her testimony
Right, it
was
was in the
mine.
purse in the
Mine is
back.
in the back.
Yeah,
I
but-
can't get
But
it.
here's the
No,
thing.
that's
Listen, you're.
baloney, though.
No,
I'm
that's
so
what
sorry.
Danny Joe said.
I know that's what she said, but all of us women have our purses, and on occasion we'll put them in the back if someone's in the front seat. But that car is huge, okay? So she could have had to put it in the
So
side
you don't
seat.
believe Danny Joe's purse was in the back?
No, I don't.
I don't necessarily.
That car's huge.
I don't necessarily question the decision not to call 911. What's going to happen if you call 911?
Are you kidding me?
But I'll tell you. Wait, can I answer that question, Your Honor?
Please go ahead.
Okay. If you call 911, number one, they will tell you what you can do to help the patient while you're with them. Number two, if you tell them it's a gunshot, they will ask, where are you? Then they'll tell you where to go for a gunshot wound. So they would have headed to Emory. He would have known what to do for her in the car.
That's the whole point of 911. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Charles, but this really irritates me.
You're not that sorry.
Why? I know, right?
Because you're doing it.
Exactly right.
But here's
They
the thing:
should have
is
called.
you're clear thinking. Okay,
Right.
It's not a clear
Okay.
thinking situation. But the fact of the matter is, you can't ignore the fact that they're actually in a car. Okay, and so they are actually uniquely positioned to get her care faster than any ambulance.
Than waiting for an
ever
ambulance.
could.
That makes sense.
Absolutely.
That makes
So-
sense. I agree.
So I'm not going to overthink the fact that they didn't call 911 when they're en route and they're familiar with the area. And on the second issue, as in terms of the the hospital, basically the navigation question by the jury. Where's the nearest hospital? All this, there's a lot that's been made of Grady, and yes, I think we all agree that Grady would have been the place to go, right? It's the premier trauma unit, the only trauma hospital in the area. Everybody knows that if you're shot, stabbed, or burned in
Go to
Atlanta,
Grady.
you go to Grady.
Okay.
But keep in mind, they're going on Piedmont, they're going northbound, and if you notice where they were on Piedmont, it's one way.
Right,
It's
right.
only one, no, but you can go left on 12th, you can go left on 14th.
Yeah.
It's one way, only till
Right, but
14th.
they're heading
you
north,
can
and
go left
Emory
on
is in that
14th.
direction, and
I'm sorry, I just don't believe it.
All right, listen, we got a great comment here, and it's a question I need to answer because everyone was talking about this stuff all day long. Let me just find it. I believe it was Melissa. Melissa, so many comments tonight, they're disappearing on me. Where'd it go? Was it Melissa? My car. All right. No, it was Rebecca. Rebecca, I want to know why she spent the night with Tex. All right, Rebecca, let me explain to you what happened, because Danny Joe's husband testified today, and he was there that night with her at the hospital, but then he went home and she didn't. She stayed in the condo complex where Tex and Diane lived. But she did not spend the night with Tex. That's not the testimony, okay? The testimony is Danny Joe went and stayed with Tex's and Diane's neighbor, Janie, who was the first witness in the trial, who was also a really good friend of Diane's. Janie's husband was away, so she felt like she could stay with Diane's other friend. They were both good friends with Diane, and they would have some girl time where they could talk about Diane and kind of grieve together. And she stayed there actually for a few days as people were coming and going. So I just want to make that clear, that according to the testimony, she did not stay with Tex, because I know there's a lot of rumors. Do you find anything unusual about that scenario with Danny Joe staying at the condo complex, not going home with her husband who came and met her at the hospital?
No, I'm not going to try to read into that. I mean, listen, there's so much reading into at this stage.
That's our job.
I know, but that is not directly related to Tex's conduct in this case, and so whatever independent decision Danny Joe made, I'm not.
Yeah, it just shows a little too much closeness as far as I'm concerned. There's just a little too much going on here, but.
Monica.
This is the sort of overanalysis
Yes.
that I think that Tex probably engaged in, and that caused him to make some of these very bad
dumb
decisions.
yes.
Monica with a great one here. Why was the gun in a bag, a Publix bag like this one? See, we got our mock gun here. This is a toy gun. We didn't want to make sure it didn't look real. Why is the gun in the bag, not in the holster?
Okay, good answer. Good. That's a very good question.
Well, I mean, thanks for the gun. Here, take the gun, grab the cannolis. Right. So apparently, I mean, I can't obviously speak to why he would have it in a bag and not a holster, but what we can speculate about is the fact that he was trying to conceal the fact that it was a gun. So if the car gets broken into, somebody looks in there, they may not.
How common is that in Georgia, where you have a lot of people have guns in cars?
Is that true?
I mean, as far as putting in a bag or getting broken into?
Getting broken into and getting guns stolen.
It's very common.
Cars get broken into all the time.
It's extremely common.
And they're looking for it.
And actually, the fact that it was in a bag and somewhat concealed is really corroborated by Danny Joe, who says that she didn't even know when they first had opened the console. She doesn't recognize it to be a gun. So presumably had a car thief broken into it. They may have passed it up and picked a.
Because a lot of people break into cars for guns because that's something easy that you can sell for a lot of money.
Exactly.
No question.
But I'll go with that part, Charles, where you said where it's hiding in the glove compartment. But why is it still in the bag on his lap?
That's a good question.
It's like, you hand me the gun.
All right.
I mean, there's no immediate threat. There's a presumed
Can I ask you
threat
this?
until you got to use it. It's sitting on your lap.
Why is his hand in the bag on the gun?
Thank you.
That's a new detail that I learned from you actually today. I didn't get a chance to watch any of the testimony. Why he would have put his hand in the bag, I don't know. Look, you just handed it to me like this. Hold on, wait. You just handed me the bag, right? And this is how I received it.
Right.
So the handle is sticking out. If we're resting on my lap, I may have just stuck my hand in there like that.
Yeah, but don't forget to put your finger on the trigger, because that's where it was that night.
Right?
If the bag was handed to him all wrapped up real tightly and all that, it'd be one thing. We just don't know. I mean, there's certain things. I honestly, when you shared that fact with me today,
that's a bad fact for defense, isn't it?
I don't think it necessarily alters anything about the physical or the ballistic evidence in the case. I mean, it's clearly something that the prosecution is making a big issue of. But listen, if in fact he was sufficiently concerned for their safety that he asked them to hand the gun back, then the next evolution to that decision is potentially you stick your hand in the bag and you leave it on your lap.
Can you shoot the gun and pull the trigger through the bag?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean even if it was... Because we know that's what happened, but in reality, if you
listen,
wanted
I was proceeding under the assumption up until today that it was
it
was like that, and there's not, this bag is so thin that it doesn't provide enough resistance that it would prevent.
There was some question on cross-examination of Danny Joe Carter by Bruce Harvey that he was trying to get her to say that the gun was in the left hand. She did a demo today, and I'll show you.
Yeah.
The demo today, she clearly put the gun in her right hand and was using the left hand. She said Tex was wiping it off after he had shot Diane. Now, a question that we had here was a gunshot residue test done to see which hand was on the gun, and that was not done.
Correct.
Would that have been effective if they had done it right afterwards?
I don't see so. Listen,
If he's got both hands in the general facility, of, like let's say it's down here, would the gunshot residue be able to determine which hand? Do you think? Say it's on his lap like this.
yeah, it should.
Should?
I mean, potentially. Now, revolvers,
Potentially.
listen, gunshot residue is a tricky thing. It doesn't always, some guns, you'll have no gunshot residue, some you'll have a clear pattern. So, who's to say whether the gunshot residue evidence would even be significant without the bag?
I think the circumstances of the case made it so they didn't bother to test for it.
Right.
Initially, they didn't have any real thought process that there was going to be anything, why do we need to test it? They thought it was an accident, I think, initially.
Claudia, and this is a good one. Lap level is not height of bullet entry into the seat. What are your thoughts on that?
That's incorrect.
Okay.
I think the physical evidence will show that it is completely consistent with being at lap level. And I don't even think that's something that the
Hey, you can see the bullet hole here if you want to show
Yeah.
us.
So, I mean, you can see right here that that's, it's not way up here, it's not way down there. It's pretty consistent with being even with the lap.
Yeah,
And it's a reasonable argument to make.
Yeah, I think it may turn out that way. Of course, we're going to have experts that'll come in and testify about all of it. Here you can see the rods with the trajectory, actual evidence photos shown to us by the defense during their opening. So if the defense is showing them, my guess is it's going to be consistent, at least according to their expert. Let's get back to some of those jury questions, and keep the comments coming, folks, please. Keep the conversation going. Jury asking questions of Danny Jo Carter. They had more than 20 of them. Did you drive the SUV earlier that day? Did you open the console that day? She did drive the SUV, but she did not open the console. And they're really curious, like, when was the gun placed there?
Right.
Yeah.
And
That's not good for Tex, is it?
And I
Especially
think
for these
that
answers.
they are, but I think the other thing is, did you open that console earlier, and was the gun in a bag if you saw it earlier? I think is the significance behind those questions, right? It's not just, was the gun in the console, but was it
That would probably
in
be
a
the
bag?
follow-up if she opened.
I mean,
Right,
if
if
it
you saw
suddenly
it.
appeared in a bag later, and it wasn't in one earlier, I think that would be a damning fact for the defense, right?
But that's not a fact, because she didn't
correct.
open it up, so
Yeah, she
we have
did.
no idea when it was
We have
placed
no
there.
idea.
The only one who can answer that is Tex, and my guess is he's not going to testify, but we'll see.
It'd be awful fun if he did.
Here's a good one. This gets, I think, to the mindset of Tex McIver. Did you ever hear Tex tell Diane it was an accident during the ride to the hospital? Like, darling, it was an accident. I didn't mean to shoot you.
Any of those words, oh my God, I love you, oh my God, I'm so hot. None
You're
of
right,
this.
but He was saying Diane.
What you said is different than it was an accident. Listen, I think when you consider what we've heard in terms of the testimony, by all accounts, this was a loving couple. They called her darling. But let's just for a moment, hold on, for a moment, let's just go with the fact that in the context of a loving relationship, it's obvious it would have been an accident, right? It's not something you'd have to say to somebody. Clearly, if you love somebody, you wouldn't have intentionally shot them,
Okay,
right?
but going along that same argument, if they're, oh my God, I'm so sorry I shot you, you would have had more statements of him climbing into the front seat, hugging her,
Yeah, but
cradling her, doing
if
everything
it was premeditated, then you would think that he would have hammed up this, oh my God, it was an accident, I'm so sorry. So you can argue it both ways. It's almost he's damned if he did, he's damned if he didn't,
But again,
right?
if they called 911, we would have heard things in the background. And since we don't have a phone call, we don't have any of those
Well, we
things.
can rely on, I think overall Danny Jo's been a fairly reliable witness. I mean, she's fuzzy on some things, but I think on the overarching details about what happened in that car, I think she's fairly reliable.
She seems fairly credible, but I just
Right.
don't like
So-
I don't believe everything she said, though. She does seem genuine, but yet she seems a little forgetful, shall we say.
Well, and she's been called out on the things
Yes,
that she's
yeah,
forgetful on.
yeah. Her mind was mush at one point, she said.
Right, but again, in the context of a loving relationship, and if it truly was accidental, I don't find that it would be that unusual that he wouldn't, it would be almost out of place for him to go, oh my God, it was an accident. Well, obviously it would have been an accident.
I don't like his behavior from even then all the way to the hospital,
Listen,
in my opinion.
his behavior is what got him here.
Yes, and that's why I think it's going to get him behind bars as well. I mean, I'm a defense attorney, and I am surprised I feel this way, but I always go by my gut, and my gut says he's going to be found guilty.
All right, Angela says Diane was an alpha. Sounded like she was kind of mean-spirited. And you were talking about the relationship, and I think what's come out during the course of this is we've heard a lot about Diane being very strong-willed, set in her ways, very pragmatic. And what we've heard in terms of her and Tex is that she would ride Tex a little bit about his weight
Yes.
and what he
Tell him
was
about these
eating.
Cheez-Its.
Right. But the bigger point today, we heard testimony from Danny Joe that one night when Tex and Diane both had been drinking at the ranch, Tex pushed her out of the bedroom. So there was a level of physicality, a physical altercation when they had been drinking. Clearly they had been drinking this night as well. So will this jury and will these prosecutors argue that, all right, you can say what you want about the relationship, once a little alcohol gets thrown in the mix, things get different.
Period. In all situations, too.
It's clearly not a good fact that's come out, right? And the prosecution can argue that that's a typical escalation in a domestic violence, in the continuum of domestic violence, it's an escalation in violence. So, not a good fact, obviously.
Yeah, and you know, Bruce Harvey's gone out of his way to say he's a southerly gentleman, you know, he's always calling her darling, darling, darling. But now prosecutors can turn around and say that darling stuff is great until he's had a few drinks,
Exactly.
and then things
Demeanor
can get different. And I think people know just from their own general knowledge that some people get hot-headed when they drink, some people get, you know, they might get very emotional,
Morose
and maybe
also.
he's the one
Yeah.
that gets a little hot-headed, and that might be the time, oh my goodness, I've got this gun.
I'm done. I'm done.
I'm done. I'm going to eat as many Cheetos as I
Yes. I'm 74 years old. I don't need
Right.
this.
want. I mean, that's what they have to argue.
Well,
Yes.
they have to argue that the intent was formed literally within blocks, right?
Yeah,
Because they were
absolutely.
planning on getting off at
Absolutely.
85.
That's easy. That's
Right,
easy.
but that's.
But it had been festering. I think that's what they have to
Yes,
argue, that
yes.
this festering. And the way that the relationship has changed recently is that he no longer was holding up his end, but still wanted to live the life. But now she's got all the money. She's got all the power over him. He's getting into retirement, but he's running out of money. His bank account is minus $5,000.
Also, you know-
He owes her hundreds of thousands of dollars. And all of a sudden, he's in a much different position.
Exactly. But you know,
Emasculated.
he is emasculated also because he spent his entire career at that law firm. And what do they do at
They're
the
pushing
end?
him out.
What do they do at the end? Now, that happens to a lot of people, and it's a horribly not fun feeling. And that probably has made him bitter to no end because he put his heart and soul in that job. I mean, I think he was there for 50 years.
Yeah.
And at the end, they just cut his salary in half and say, peace. I mean, that's
And that's the
really-
picture they got to paint. Is it
They
enough?
have to.
Is
Well,
it enough?
And that's the thing is, again, the physical and the ballistic evidence alone does not preclude the possibility that this was an accident. So you have to get into Tex's mind, and the only two ways that they can do that is through the testimonial evidence that we're hearing now, and then the circumstantial evidence. But what the defense has to do is put that in the proper context, and to say, look, you've heard this, but here's what you haven't heard. The prosecution hasn't provided any evidence of some sort of browser history where he's searching how to stage a shooting and make it look like an accident. You haven't heard any evidence of infidelity. You will not hear, and you haven't heard of any of his friends that he confided in and said, "I want her dead,"
Yeah, I'm
or
done with
anything
her.
like that.
Yeah.
That's the sort of stuff that then it gets beyond a reasonable doubt. What we're hearing to this point is, in my opinion, evidence that doesn't rise to that level. It's pointing to a lot of bad judgment on his part. To me, it's pointing to a guy who's trying to control the narrative, who's concerned about the spin, he's concerned about perceptions, and he makes some very bad decisions as a result of that. That look very suspicious. We've heard the voicemail. We've heard a lot of stuff. That
I'm going to play that voicemail in a second. And it brings us to the next question, which Claudia is asking. Vinny, Hey, Claudia. Why was the initial charge upgraded? And I think what happened here, his initial arrest is by
Involuntary.
police, right?
Yeah,
Involuntary.
exactly.
And then there's a further investigation. The other fact, and we've been playing it in the setup piece that we have before the show, where you hear the prosecutor making the argument that at one point, Tex McIver hired, or was trying to hire, one of the best friends of the DA. And he told him, listen, you can get these charges dismissed, and if you do, there's a big bonus for you, and I won't mind if you share it with the DA. So obviously the DA found out about that at some point. So now, what is a DA to do if you've got evidence that the man who shot and killed his wife, who you're going to charge with something, now believes he can buy you off? Now all of a sudden you're like, well, number one, he's not getting the case dismissed because that's just not happening. Plus, based on the evidence, I think there's enough here for murder. Let's go for a murder charge here. So I think that's part of the thinking. I know the way I would take that if I was the DA. It's like, you think you can buy me off? All right, murder. I've got evidence for murder here, and no plea deal.
Exactly
Well,
right.
the DA's actually backed into a corner. Paul Howard's backed into a corner. If that information came to light, I mean, he's really backed into a corner. If he doesn't charge him, it almost looks like he's somewhat complicit in some way, right?
I don't know that's how Paul Howard works, though. I don't agree. In this particular prosecutor, in this particular jurisdiction, I don't think that's how Paul Howard would react, being felt like pushed into a corner and making decisions that way. I just don't feel like that's how Paul Howard works.
But they have enough evidence here, and you as a prosecutor can always offer a plea deal.
Yeah, of course.
So if someone is floating out the idea that you think that you can get charges dismissed or
That's
get a
gone.
deal,
That's gone.
it's off the
That's gone.
table.
Absolutely.
Once he has told someone that he's willing to pay you off, wait, no.
Well,
Ethically, I can't do anything with you because this is
And
the
then you
appearance.
say that
This is
we're
bad.
going
but
after him now.
the part that doesn't make sense, and I actually don't know how this got to the prosecutor's office.
Right, we'll find out
Because
later
we'll
on in the
find
trial.
out, but as a general rule, your clients can say things like that. Your clients can say all kinds of things because they're angry, upset in the privileged arena.
He was out of the privileged arena. His lawyer had left the room.
That's the problem.
On
I know.
purpose. The lawyer left the room, and he was in there with someone who's going to do public relations for him. So we'll see how all that plays out, but I think that's part of the answer of why things were upgraded and there was no deal here. Because
think
the
it's also
obvious
the
deal
evidence.
is involuntary manslaughter. You know, whatever the amount of time is, it is, whether he accepts or doesn't accept. But I think once that happens, as a prosecutor, you've got to be above all that. And it's not being spiteful. It's like, I've got to get rid of the appearance that something wrong is going on here if he thinks he can get some deal or buy his way out of
But I
this whole
think they
thing.
also learned a whole lot more about the case. They
Well,
learned
I mean,
about
it's
these
really just
voicemails, they learned about his
the witness
behavior.
tampering is what they're learning
Yes,
about. I mean, listen,
that's
so
problematic,
based upon,
usually.
again, based upon the physical evidence and the ballistic evidence, the case was originally charged appropriately
Correct.
as an involuntary
And then his
manslaughter
actions
and
dug as
reckless
well.
conduct. The only other stuff that really comes to light is the witness tampering
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And then you can either upgrade charges based on witness tampering,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or you can develop a whole new theory in the case, is
And
what
that's
the
what
prosecution
occurred.
has done.
That's what occurred.
And they've looked at the circumstantial evidence in a whole different light as a result of that.
Yeah.
To me, I think it's a stretch, and I think they've overcharged the case. I think it would have been it would have been a winning case for them if it stayed with the original charges and they upgraded with some of the witness
I'm
tampering.
thrilled to
Last
have
thing-
this prosecutor. See
Last
what
thing we're going
this
to
judge
do
does.
is going to talk about this voicemail that was played. This is a voicemail left by Tex McIver. So it's Tex McIver speaking in court today. Voicemail he left for Danny Joe's husband. Hopefully this all works. This is very rudimentary. But I was on AV crew. I was on AV crew in high school. So let's listen to it. Wait for it.
Tommy Lee is Tex. Sir, let me just be plain. Danny is about to send me to prison. Please erase this voicemail message, but call me right away. Y'all have no idea the problem this is causing. It's innocent, but it's absolutely nuclear for me. Please call me.
That's it. Quick take on that.
Nuclear. I mean, that word is a lawyer word, I think, but it really encapsulates his knowledge of the situation, and he's like trying to fix everything after the situation happened. So I think that just shoots him in the foot big time.
Well, but he says he acknowledges that it's innocent, which would.
What Danny Joe is doing is innocent.
That's correct. But
He
again,
didn't
to
say,
me.
I'm innocent.
No, to me, it points more to his concern for the perception. And again, if you operate within the legal realm, you know that the criminal justice system is administered by human beings. And cops make mistakes, judges make bad rulings, prosecutors sometimes engage in malpractice, juries sometimes reach the wrong verdict. And you don't want to leave things to chance if you operate in this arena. And I think in this case he overthought to his detriment.
Yeah.
And he's making silly decisions, and he's making bad moves and taking bad actions.
Saying delete this message is.
Well, that's what I have to do, folks. I'm going to delete that so Tex doesn't get mad at me. I'm going to delete that message right now. So it's gone, Tex. Nobody will ever know. All right, great job tonight. Defense investigator Charles Middlestat, defense attorney Meg Strickler. You get in trouble. This is a great team to hire right here, by the way. We do this every night at 7:30. We take a look at what happened in court, get some perspective and analysis of the whole thing. And then what you can do tonight at 11, we will show you some more of the highlights, some of the back and forth, some more analysis, and break it down for you on the late feed. That's on 11alive.com and, of course, on 11 Alive here in Atlanta. Then every morning, when the trial starts, you can watch the stream on 11alive.com, or you can watch it on my Facebook page. Vinnie Politan, 11 Alive. Vinnie Politan, 11 Alive. Ask the folks. I stream that for you. You can have a great conversation while you're watching it all. And that's it for tonight. I'll see you on the late feed. We'll see you here tomorrow morning at 7:30, and I'll see you on Vinnie Politan, 11 Alive on Facebook tomorrow morning.